They called me the family failure at 32. While my cousins flashed their law degrees and medical licenses at every gathering, I was the guy who collected stamps in his childhood bedroom, unemployed for 8 months after the tech layoffs hit Silicon Valley. My dad would introduce me with that familiar grimace. "This is Michael, he's figuring things out." But here's the thing about being underestimated, it gives you time to discover what others overlook. That dusty shoebox tucked behind my old baseball trophies? The one filled with stamps I'd been collecting since I was 8 years old? Everyone assumed it was just another symbol of my arrested development. My younger brother Jake would roll his eyes whenever he saw me with my magnifying glass. "Still playing with your little pictures, Mike?" What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that 3 months earlier, while researching online, I'd stumbled across something that made my hands shake. Hidden among the hundreds of stamps I'd carefully preserved was a 1918 inverted Jenny, one of only 24 known to exist. Worth more than most people's houses. I'd kept this secret through countless family dinners where my father would jokingly suggest I sell my toys and get serious about life. Through job interviews where I felt like I was drowning. Through my ex-girlfriend Sarah packing her bags because she couldn't handle dating someone without direction. Today was my cousin Rebecca's engagement party in my parents' Palo Alto backyard. The whole extended family would be there, including Uncle Robert, who never missed a chance to compare his son's Stanford MBA to my hobby phase. I'd planned something that would change everything, but first, I had to endure what I knew was coming, one final, very public humiliation that would either destroy me or set me free. I adjusted my collar, grabbed the shoebox, and walked downstairs toward the sound of laughter that would soon turn to stunned silence. My father, Richard Chin, was the American dream incarnate, a Taiwanese immigrant who'd built a software consulting firm from nothing in the 1980s boom. He wore his success like armor, especially around other Asian families in our Palo Alto neighborhood where achievement was the only currency that mattered. Mom, Linda, had been a pediatric nurse before becoming the perfect Silicon Valley wife, hosting dinner parties where conversations revolved around children's SAT scores and college acceptances. Our family operated on a simple hierarchy: achievement equals worth. My brother Jake, 28, was the golden child, a software engineer at Google with a Tesla and a tech bro apartment in San Francisco. He'd learned early to weaponize Dad's approval, often bringing up my failures during family gatherings. "Remember when Mike wanted to be a professional stamp collector, ? He'd say, making air quotes while Dad's jaw tightened with embarrassment. The stamp collecting had started innocently when I was 8. Grandpa Chin, Dad's father, had given me his old album before he passed. Stories from around the world, he'd whispered in his broken English, pointing to each stamp. Dad tolerated it initially, educational, he reasoned. But as I grew older and the collection grew larger, it became a source of shame. Real American kids played sports or learned coding. They didn't spend weekends at stamp shows with elderly collectors who smelled like mothballs. The humiliation crystallized during my high school graduation party. I just announced my acceptance to UC Davis for art history, not Berkeley for computer science like Jake would later achieve. Dad stood before our extended family and said, "At least Michael's finally putting away childish things. No more stamps, right, son?" The room erupted in relieved laughter. I nodded, dying inside, and shoved my collection into storage that night. College brought new disappointments. I switched majors 3 times, finally settling on business, Dad's suggestion. After graduation, I bounced between startups, never quite finding my footing in the ruthless tech world where Jake thrived. Every family gathering became a progress report. I was destined to fail. But the secret I carried now changed everything. 3 months ago, while researching stamp values during another sleepless night of unemployment anxiety, I'd been methodically photographing my collection for potential sale. That's when I saw it, the faint inverted airplane on what I'd always thought was a common 1918 airmail stamp. My hands trembled as I cross-referenced it with auction records. An inverted Jenny, the holy grail of American philately. The last one sold at Sotheby's for $1.35 million. I'd had it authenticated quietly through a dealer in San Francisco, sworn to secrecy until I decided what to do. 4 weeks, I'd carried this knowledge like a loaded gun, watching my family's pity and disappointment, knowing I held something that would shatter their assumptions about success and worth. The grand gesture I'd planned for today would expose everything, their cruelty, their narrow definitions of value, and the reality that while they'd been climbing corporate ladders, I'd been sitting on a fortune they dismissed as junk. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your location in the comments below. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. Rebecca's engagement party was peak Silicon Valley performative success. The backyard buzzed with tech executives, venture capitalists, and their immaculately groomed children discussing IPOs and Stanford admissions over craft cocktails. Mom had hired caterers who served Korean fusion small plates on biodegradable bamboo plates, very Palo Alto conscious. I arrived with my shoebox tucked under one arm, drawing immediate stares. Cousin Jennifer, a corporate lawyer at Google, raised her eyebrows. Michael's brought show and tell, she announced loudly enough for nearby conversations to pause. Dad materialized instantly, his face flushed with that familiar cocktail of anger and embarrassment. What are you doing with that thing? I told you to dress appropriately. He was wearing his lucky navy blazer, the one he'd worn to every important business meeting since 1995. I thought it was time to share something special with the family, I said, setting the box on the dessert table between artisanal macarons and locally sourced fruit tarts. Uncle Robert, Jake's father-in-law-to-be, approached with his characteristic smirk. A real estate mogul who'd made millions flipping Menlo Park properties during the boom, he enjoyed nothing more than public displays of superiority. Still clinging to childhood, Michael? Most people your age are buying houses, not playing with, what is that exactly? Stamps, I said simply. The circle was forming now, that dreaded family amphitheater where public shaming became entertainment. Aunt Susan, who ran a successful dermatology practice in Palo Alto, joined with her signature passive-aggressive smile. It's sweet that you've held on to them. Rebecca, remember when you collected stickers? So precious at that age. Rebecca, radiant in her engagement glow and clutching her Stanford Business School graduate fiancé, laughed nervously. Uncle Michael always marched to his own drum. Jake appeared with his girlfriend Emma, a Facebook product manager who looked perpetually annoyed by family gatherings. Oh God, he brought the stamps. Dad, didn't you tell him to get rid of those years ago? Dad's voice carried that edge I remembered from childhood disappointments. Michael, this isn't the time or place. Put that away and try to act like an adult for once. Robert was just telling me about his son's promotion at Salesforce. But I was committed now. The box sat between us like Pandora's container, and I could feel the weight of 32 years of accumulated shame pressing down. Actually, I thought Uncle Robert might appreciate seeing something valuable, since he's in the business of recognizing worth. Robert's laugh was sharp. Valuable? Son, I've been in real estate for 25 years. I know value when I see it. That's a box of old paper. The crowd was growing. Neighbors, family friends, the young tech couples who treated these gatherings like networking events. Someone had their phone out, typical Silicon Valley, documenting everything for social media. How much could stamps possibly be worth? Asked Dr. Jennifer Park, Rebecca's future mother-in-law, a successful plastic surgeon who collected contemporary art. I mean, realistically. Mom tried to intervene, her voice tight with social anxiety. Michael, honey, maybe we should. No, I want to hear this, Dad interrupted. Michael, enlighten us. What's your little hobby worth? And please be realistic. Don't embarrass yourself further. The words hung in the California evening air. Embarrass myself further. As if my entire existence was an ongoing source of family shame that needed management. I looked around the circle, these people who'd spent decades measuring my worth by their standards, dismissing my passion as childish delusion. Jake stepped closer, emboldened by the audience. Come on, what's your whole collection worth? $100? 200? Maybe you could finally afford to move out of Mom and Dad's house. The laughter rippled through the crowd. Even some family friends were smiling now, enjoying the show. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, the peak humiliation before the revelation that would change everything. If you're enjoying this story of family drama and hidden treasures, please subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers and every like helps us reach that goal. Your support means the world. The circle had tightened around me like a noose. 40+ people now formed an audience, their faces showing various degrees of amusement, pity, and secondhand embarrassment. I could see neighbors from adjacent backyards peering over fences, drawn by the commotion. Someone's teenage daughter was definitely live streaming this on Instagram. "Well," Uncle Robert pressed, his Rolex catching the string lights Mom had hung between the oak trees. "We're waiting for your grand reveal, Michael. What's the damage? What did you waste your money on this time?" Dad stepped closer, his voice dropping to that deadly quiet tone I remembered from childhood lectures. "Answer the question, son. What is your collection actually worth?" The way he emphasized "actually" made it clear he expected a number that would justify 32 years of disappointment. I opened the shoebox slowly, deliberately. The familiar smell of old paper and preservation sheets wafted out. Inside, hundreds of stamps nestled in protective sleeves, organized in albums I'd maintained since childhood with obsessive care. The crowd leaned in, expecting to see children's toys. "The entire collection?" I asked, running my finger along the spine of the main album. "Including everything?" "Everything," Jake said impatiently. "The whole sad collection. Give us a number." I pulled out the main album, feeling its weight. 24 years of careful curation, research, and passion reduced to a dollar figure for people who measured human worth in stock options and property values. "The collection," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet backyard, "is worth approximately $1.4 million. The silence was instant and complete. Even the neighbor's dog stopped barking. Park laughed first, a sharp bark of disbelief. "Oh, come on. Michael, that's the centerpiece," I continued, opening the album to a specific page. "Is this 1918 inverted Jenny airmail stamp? One of 24 known to exist." I held up the protective sleeve containing the small rectangle of paper that had haunted my dreams for 3 months. "Authenticated by Heritage Auctions in San Francisco. Current market value is approximately $1.35 million. Uncle Robert's face went through several color changes. "That's impossible. It's a stamp." "The same way the Mona Lisa is just paint on canvas," I replied. I pulled out the authentication certificate, still crisp from the dealer's office. Professional appraisal, insurance documentation, and a conditional sale agreement with a private collector in New York who's been searching for this specific stamp for 15 years. Dad grabbed the certificate with shaking hands. His successful software consulting firm, the one he'd built from nothing, was worth maybe $2 million total. In his hand was proof that his failure son possessed something worth nearly as much. "But where did you, Mom stammered. "Grandpa Chen gave it to me when I was 8, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "It was part of his collection from when he worked at the post office in Taipei before immigrating. He told me some stamps were special, worth keeping safe. I just didn't know how special until recently." The crowd was murmuring now, phones appearing as people desperately Googled, "inverted Jenny stamp value." The Instagram livestream girl was frantically whispering updates to her followers. Jake's face had gone pale. "You're telling me that while Dad was," he couldn't finish the sentence. "While you were all treating me like a failure for collecting stamps?" I closed the album carefully. "Yeah. While you were laughing at my childish hobby, I was sitting on more money than most of you will see in your lifetimes." Rebecca's fiancé, the Stanford MBA, stepped forward. "Can I see the authentication?" His hand trembled slightly as he examined the paperwork. "Jesus Christ. This is real. Heritage Auctions doesn't mess around with documentation like this." Uncle Robert, the real estate king who'd built his fortune on recognizing value, looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. "You mean all these years when we were telling you to grow up and get serious?" "I was already sitting on generational wealth," I finished. "Wealth that came from respecting something you all dismissed as worthless." The party had completely stopped. Caterers stood frozen with serving trays. The hired bartender had abandoned his station to listen. Even the string quartet Mom had hired for ambience had stopped playing. Dad looked up from the certificate, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in months without disappointment clouding them. "Michael, we didn't know." "No," I said, taking back the authentication and closing the shoebox. "You didn't know because you never bothered to understand. You just assumed that anything I cared about had no value." I tucked the box under my arm and walked toward the garden gate, leaving behind 40 stunned faces and 24 years of family humiliation. Behind me, I could hear the explosion of voices beginning, questions, accusations, desperate attempts to process what had just happened. Dad's voice called out over the chaos, "Michael, wait. Where are you going?" I didn't turn around. "To figure things out," I said, using his own words against him. "On my own terms this time." The aftermath was everything I'd imagined and worse. My phone buzzed incessantly for 3 days straight. Jake called 17 times the first night alone, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails that evolved from anger to confusion to desperate apology attempts. "Mike, call me back. This is insane. We need to talk about this. The whole family is losing their minds." Mom's texts were the hardest to read. "Honey, please come home. Your father hasn't slept. He keeps pulling out old photo albums of you with Grandpa Chin. We made terrible mistakes." But it was Rebecca who showed up at my apartment on Tuesday morning with coffee and genuine tears. "I need to apologize," she said, standing in my doorway still wearing scrubs from her hospital residency. "Not just for Sunday, but for years of going along with it. I always thought your passion for collecting was actually kind of beautiful, but I was too much of a coward to say it." She'd driven over after her overnight shift at UCSF. "The whole family is in chaos. Uncle Robert hasn't spoken to anyone since Sunday. Jake told Emma what happened and she broke up with him, said she couldn't respect someone who'd spent years bullying his own brother. Dad and Uncle Richard got into a screaming match about parenting philosophies. The real revelation came when Rebecca handed me a manila envelope. Aunt Linda found this in Grandpa Chen's old papers. She thought you should see it. Inside was a letter dated 3 months before Grandpa's death, written in his careful English. "My grandson Michael understands that treasures hide in unexpected places. I give him my collection because he sees value where others see waste. The stamps will teach him that worth comes from passion, not approval. Tell him when he is ready, some gifts take time to reveal their true meaning." I had to sit down. Grandpa had known. He'd deliberately chosen me not despite my youth, but because of my genuine interest in the stories behind each stamp. The authentication process had opened doors I never expected. Sarah Martinez, the stamp dealer who'd verified the inverted Jenny, called with an offer that changed everything. "Michael, I've been following your situation online. Yes, it's gone viral on philatelic forums, and I want to offer you something. My auction house needs someone with your knowledge and passion. We have collectors worldwide looking for someone who understands both the technical and emotional value of these pieces." Within 2 weeks, I had a job offer as a senior acquisitions consultant, starting salary $90,000 plus commission on major finds. Real work, using knowledge that had been dismissed as worthless for decades. The money from the stamp sale, which I completed through a private auction that attracted bidders from 6 countries, allowed me to finally move out of my parents' house. I found a small craftsman bungalow in Berkeley, close enough to visit but far enough to establish real independence. Jake was the first family member to visit my new place. He sat awkwardly on my couch, fidgeting with his phone. "I've been thinking about what happened," he said finally. "I realized I don't actually know anything about what you care about. I never asked about your stamps, never tried to understand why they mattered to you. I just followed Dad's lead." The conversation lasted 4 hours. We talked about the pressure he'd felt to be perfect, how he'd used my perceived failures to deflect attention from his own fears of not living up to expectations. "When you revealed that stamp," he said, "I realized I've spent my whole adult life climbing someone else's ladder while you were building something real." Dad's apology took longer and came in an unexpected form. He showed up at my new house on a Saturday morning carrying a wooden case. Inside were his father's tools from the post office in Taipei, stamps, sorting implements, and a magnifying glass worn smooth from decades of use. "Grandpa always said you reminded him of himself," Dad said quietly. I thought he meant stubborn. I never realized he meant passionate about details others overlook. His voice broke slightly. "I spent so many years trying to make you into what I thought you should be that I never saw who you actually were." We sat in my kitchen, drinking tea and looking through photo albums he'd brought. Pictures of 8-year-old me with Grandpa, both of us hunched over stamp albums, completely absorbed. "He would have been so proud," Dad said. "Not of the money, of the fact that you kept faith with something you loved even when everyone told you it was worthless." The unexpected twist came 6 months later. Martinez called with news that made my discovery look small. "Michael, remember that wooden case your father brought you? We should probably take a look at those postal implements. Some of the sorting stamps from the Taipei post office are extraordinarily rare." Hidden in Grandpa's tool collection were 3 more stamps worth a combined $400,000, pieces he'd saved from his workdays, probably not even knowing their value. The family that had dismissed my worthless hobby had been sitting on nearly $2 million in philatelic treasures spread across 2 generations. The grand gesture had worked beyond my wildest expectations. Not just because of the money, but because it forced everyone to reconsider their assumptions about value, passion, and worth. Uncle Robert, humbled by his complete misjudgment, started attending stamp shows with me, genuinely curious about what he'd missed. Mom framed the letter from Grandpa and hung it in their hallway, replacing a photo of Jake's college graduation. My healing journey wasn't instantaneous. 24 years of feeling inadequate doesn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I understood that my worth had never been dependent on their approval. Grandpa had seen something in me that even I hadn't recognized, the ability to find treasure in what others discarded, to maintain faith in passion despite ridicule. The definition of family evolved too. The people who gathered at my housewarming party weren't all related by blood. They included fellow collectors, new colleagues, neighbors who appreciated my story, and family members who'd learned to see me clearly for the first time. Rebecca brought her fiancé, who'd become genuinely interested in philatelic history. Jake came with a new girlfriend who collected vintage postcards, finally understanding that passion takes many forms. The shoebox that had contained my shame became a symbol of hidden value waiting to be discovered in unlikely places. And sometimes, just sometimes, the family failure knows something the family success never learned. Looking back now, 18 months later, I realized the stamp was never really about the money. It was about validation, proof that the 8-year-old boy who fell in love with stories from around the world had been right all along. That passion and dedication have value even when nobody else recognizes it. I still work in philatelic acquisitions, traveling to estate sales and private collections across the country. Last month, I helped a widow in Portland discover her late husband's coin collection contained several rare pieces worth enough to pay off her mortgage. She cried when I explained what he'd left her, not because of the financial relief, but because someone finally understood that his weird hobby had been an act of love. My relationship with my family isn't perfect, but it's real now in ways it never was before. Dad and I meet for lunch every other week, and he actually listens when I talk about work. Jake started his own small business, app development focused on helping collectors catalog and value their items. He says I inspired him to build something meaningful rather than just climbing corporate ladders. The most profound change is internal. For 32 years, I measured my worth against other people's definitions of success. I thought happiness meant making them proud, fitting into their vision of achievement. But the moment I walked away from that engagement party with my shoebox under my arm, I stopped seeking their approval and started trusting my own judgment. That doesn't mean the path forward was easy. There were nights when doubt crept in, when I wondered if I'd burned bridges unnecessarily. But every time I looked at Grandpa Chen's letter, I remembered that some gifts take time to reveal their true meaning. The gift wasn't just the stamp, it was the permission to value what I valued, regardless of anyone else's opinion. To anyone watching this who feels like the family disappointment, who's been told their passions are worthless or childish, keep faith with what matters to you. Whether it's art, music, collecting, writing, or any pursuit that brings you genuine joy, that passion has value beyond what others can measure. Sometimes the thing everyone tells you to abandon is exactly what will save you. The world is full of hidden treasures waiting for people who care enough to look closely. Sometimes those treasures are stamps in shoeboxes. Sometimes they're businesses waiting to be built, art waiting to be created, or stories waiting to be told. But they only reveal themselves to people who refuse to give up on what they love. Your worth isn't determined by family approval or social expectations. It comes from honoring your authentic self and having the courage to pursue what genuinely matters to you, even when nobody else understands. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that their passions have value, regardless of what others think. Drop a comment below about a time when something you loved was dismissed by others. I read every single comment, and your stories inspire me to keep sharing these tales of unexpected triumph. Together, we're building a community that celebrates authentic passion over conventional success. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the thing everyone tells you to abandon is exactly what will set you free.